Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is September 19th, Sunday, 2021, and I'm actually going to be doing fun family event today. So I have a few minutes before I have to get on with my day, and I figured I would just hop on here for a moment. So, a couple things I wanted to mention. So the first thing is the Patriot Roundtable. Yesterday, I went to upload that and actually did upload it to YouTube, and then one of my listeners reached out on Telegram and let me know that the last 20 minutes or so, roughly like 22 minutes, there was no audio. The audio just randomly cut out. Now, this was a video that was over 2 hours long. It was roughly 2 hours. And for the first hour and a half, everything was fine. And for whatever reason, the last half hour or the last 20 minutes or so, the audio didn't translate for whatever reason. It just cut out. So yesterday, I spent a decent amount of the day yesterday doing some edits on that because we did run into a few issues that we had to edit out, and it was kind of frustrating because I spent a decent amount of time editing this thing, and it just didn't end up working out the way I wanted it to. So for those of you folks who are wondering, and I posted about this on YouTube just to let people know and apologize if you were in the middle of listening to it when I took it down, because I figured it would be a simple matter of just re-uploading it or trying to figure out what was going on. But I went and re-edited the entire thing. I did the whole thing from start to finish all over again as a new file, and the same exact thing happened. So I'm not really sure what it is I'm dealing with, but I just ran out of time yesterday to be able to focus on that. So I have the original, and I'll get it to you folks just as soon as I can figure out these technical issues. The other thing I wanted to mention was yesterday I did a pretty heated coffee chat, as people know, and there were some people in the audience who were turned off by it, and I just wanted to address that really quickly. Now, first of all, when I make a podcast, it's never with the expectation that every single person who listens to it is going to resonate with that message. And I accept the fact that, part of the nature of what I do is opening myself up to criticism. And I can certainly appreciate and I know the difference between somebody trying to troll me versus somebody who is genuinely enjoys my content, but for whatever reason just didn't have the reaction or didn't resonate with the podcast in the way that I had obviously hoped that they would. And I went back and I listened to it, and normally I'll be honest with folks, when I do a coffee chat or when I do one of my normal podcasts, most of the time I don't go back and listen to it, because the way I look at it is that I do this so that other people can listen, and it's really not because when I listen to myself speaking, I don't get that much out of it because I'm just listening to myself. So generally, I don't really spend that much time doing it. I'd much rather just focus on moving forward and working on the next one, and enjoying the fact that people are appreciating the podcast. Just that's what keeps me going and fuels me. But because there were members of the audience who I do respect, by the way, who shared with me that they had a very different take on yesterday's podcast, I did go back and I listened to it, and I agree that at certain points, it was definitely it was very rant like, I think, at certain points, and that's usually not my style. I usually I try to I try to contain those types of feelings. I try to not allow myself to to engage with them too much, because my anger can really it can really consume me at certain points, and I recognize that, and I try to avoid that. But the flip side of that coin, and I think for those people who are listening to this, who listened to yesterday's episode and did enjoy it, I think the flip side of that coin is that this is a very real feeling that a lot of us are experiencing, and I think we have different ideas and different attitudes about our feelings, our emotions, and how we should process them. And I think a lot of people really enjoy hearing somebody get really angry and enraged, even, because that's how they're feeling. And I guess in some ways, when I do this, it's not so that I can be self-indulgent with my own feelings and just dump things on my audience, but really it's more to show some solidarity, with people, and an understanding that I understand what people are feeling. And again, this doesn't apply to everyone. I mean, sure, there are a lot of people, I'm sure, who process their emotions differently, who, may be angry, maybe even enraged, but they have a very different way of expressing it. My way of expressing it, is like I've told people. I mean, when I get into that mode, I mean, I literally go into war mode. And I think what it was yesterday, quite honestly, that had me in that frame of mind, in addition, of course, to all of the insanity that's been going on lately, and all of the stress and the anger that's been building for years now. I mean, let alone just in recent days, weeks, and months. I think the thing that really got me amped up was that video that I actually referenced in my podcast yesterday, the one out of Australia. And it's, that video has really gone viral. I mean, it's just, and there are folks who have done, other videos from it, focused in on one particular guy who, I mean, he took out like four of these tyrannical Nazi cops. And people are, when I watched that, people are really reacting to this video, and I'm no different. So when I watched that, it got me amped up. It got me, when I see this tyranny, when I see that, these injustices, and I see, my brothers and sisters in a different country, albeit, but my brothers and sisters who are patriots take a stand, and not only that, just plow through a line of tyranny. That got me really, really amped up. And I think yesterday, part of what I was feeling and expressing was not just anger, but it was a rage-like determination that these people exhibited when they were trying to be, when they were trying to walk down a street and they were trying, the police were trying to block their way. They just had it, and they just, the police opened up with their pepper spray, their mace, and all that stuff. And these people, instead of running away, instead of running in the other direction, the way, Antifa does, and these people went straight at them. I mean, they went and they charged forward instead of retreating. And I think that that's just so, so important. And it really got me amped up. It got me jacked up, and like I was in fight mode and I was ready to go. And sometimes when that mode hits me, it's like I've said to people before, I get scared sometimes at my own anger, my own levels of rage. It just, and that wasn't even, to be honest, what I listened to yesterday when I was playing back my audio, that wasn't even close to me being at a 10. I mean, that was more like a 6, 5 or a 6, in terms of where I can go, in terms of my emotional range. And again, am I proud of that per se? I mean, I don't know. I'm not. It's not as if I'm bragging about it. In fact, I think, like I said, I mean, sometimes it frightens me that I have this, that I have this inside of me. But at the same time, I also thank God that I do, because I understand that, we're at war right now. And the war is not physical, nor am I calling for it to be physical. I mean, perhaps there were some people who misconstrued. I mean, people, you say things. It's one thing I've learned is you say one thing and people misconstrue it about 10 or 12 different ways. I mean, Gene Decode and I have talked about this, that people just apply meanings where they're, to your words, that, or change the meaning of your words in a way that really just doesn't reflect their true intention. And, some people, I think, got the impression that I was trying to call for some sort of an uprising, and a physical uprising. And that's not at all what I was saying. I never once said that. And I'm not calling for any kind of type of violence. I am calling for a spiritual uprising. I am calling for civil disobedience, mass civil disobedience. And I am calling for people to stand up for one another in the same way that they did in Australia and they're doing in other countries. Not only to take to the streets to show, as a show of force, but also to take care of one another, to rescue one another. to look out for one another. I mean, the tyranny, what I was talking about yesterday is the tyranny is enabled because of the compliance of the people, and the compliance of the people is all rooted in fear. If they keep us in fear, they keep us compliant. And if they keep us compliant, then they keep us separated. They keep us divided. Then they can control us. They can manage us. They can do whatever they want. They can implement their tyranny. But the second that we stand up for one another and we return to that original ethos, they run and hide in fear because there are so many more of us than there are of them. And that's what I'm pointing out to folks. Not that we need to start getting physical at this point, unless they get physical with us, but to recognize our true power and to recognize that it's no longer an option, folks, to sit back and to just simply have a philosophical conversation about what's happening. We need to be far more aggressive on all different fronts. And I think that a mixture of that sentiment and, of course, the feelings and the emotions that I was experiencing in large part as a reaction to the footage that I saw, it really inspired me. So it's like I was angered and inspired at the same time. And I was trying to, in essence, rally my fellow patriots and get everybody, to take it to that next level of resistance, of civil disobedience, of peaceful resistance. I'm not calling for violence. I need to be very, very clear about that. I don't think anybody in their right mind will get on a podcast and start calling for physical violence and start calling for attacks and pushing for war. That's not what I'm doing, and never have I done. And I never will, because that's not, obviously, if it gets to the point where things have unraveled and they're coming after us physically, I don't think anyone's going to need me to tell them to resist. People are going to do that on their own. What I'm doing is I'm trying to get people to rise up in a peaceful way. And yes, to get physical if in the process of self-defense, we have to get physical and come to the aid and the rescue of our fellows, then yes, I do think that that's what we need to do. We cannot allow this divide and conquer strategy to go any farther. We can't allow injustice, and we have to be willing to put ourselves in the middle of a situation if we see an injustice happening. How many times, I referenced the video about Australia, which really was a positive outcome in my view. The people just, bashed through that barricade because it needed to be done, and they were being assaulted by the police. But I've seen a whole bunch of other videos, of course, were just and by the way, not only did they bust through the line of these police officers, but they also, these tyrants really, but they also, as the police tried to grab a few stragglers here and there and arrest them, other people came over and ripped them out of the custody of police. They rescued them from these tyrants. Okay? That's another part of this video that I didn't even really discuss that inspired me. Because it made me think about all these other videos that I've seen where just the opposite thing has happened, where there's been a crowd of people surrounding the police, tackling somebody for some probably, thing that goes in your arm related reason, or really for any reason, really, it doesn't matter. But that's, I think the context of these videos, and what happens is people stand around with their cameras and their phones and they're videoing it, and nobody is coming to the aid of this individual. Nobody's helping them. There's like 5-6 police officers, and there's this one guy on the ground, and, surrounding them is probably 100, 200 people with their cameras out. And my whole thing is, put your damn camera down and get over there and wrestle this person away from the police. Yes, look, if they're doing something, I'm not talking about standing in the way of the police doing their duties, okay? But I'm talking about when we see a blatant injustice occurring. All right? That's what I'm talking about. And that people need to, if we came together as one, and humanity by and large, a vast majority, have that same attitude that we're not going to tolerate any injustice anymore. And that we are willing to get physical if necessary to prevent that from happening. I guarantee you that these tyrants will back off because they can't handle all of us. They can only handle us when we're isolated, when we're alone, and when people have the instinct to grab their camera instead of grab the shoulders and throw someone aside so that they can help their fellows. And I can tell you right now, I mean, I don't have any fear of dying if it's for something that I believe in. Like I've said many times, this is not about self-preservation. This is about the preservation of our society, of our species, of our way of life, of our freedom, of our rights, of our birthright. That's what this is about. It's not about me. It's not about you. If anything, it's about everyone who's going to come after us. It's about our children and their children and all these future generations. That's what's at stake here. That's what history is calling us to contend with. We're the generation who has to take the stand against tyranny. Because if we don't, of course, we understand that our children and their children's children on into the future, we understand that they're going to grow up. It makes me sad and frightened to even think about, and angry, really. I'm going to try to not get angry again this morning. To think about the world and what it'll look like, or what it would look like if these people had their way. And tying this thing, all of this back into the overall big picture here, and Q and the plan and everything else. I mean, I can't lose sight of the fact that, I do believe that we're getting very, very close to seeing a major event that's going to change everything. But like I've talked about many times, I'm not an insider. I'm an ordinary American, just like all of you. And just like all of you, I have a foot in two different worlds. At least that's how it feels. There are days when I focus almost entirely on the plan, and my faith and my spirit and everything aligns with the plan, and I'm able to be very patient and grounded as a result of that. And then there are other days where that foot that's in the other world, and that part of my brain, I guess you could even say, that's in that other world, that has to exist in that other world, and this reality, in this matrix, asserts itself to the forefront. And all of the emotions and all of the rage and all of those feelings, they come to the surface. And I understand, when people say, well, you've got to, and I believe me, I'm not trying to downplay this. We have to keep our vibrational frequencies high. We cannot, allow ourselves to be consumed by anger, by rage, by fear, by all of those things. I mean, these are messages that I've consistently relayed to my audience, and that I believe in. And I don't, but for me personally, you can have a different point of view on this, but for me personally, I don't think it's a contradiction to have that message, but to also have other messages where, you express your humanity, and you express that anger, and you express that fear, and you express all of those things that you're feeling. I don't think that it's heroic to just act as if your emotions don't exist when they're based on something very, 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 very real and very, very present and very, very obvious. I don't think that that's, I mean, in fact, I think it's more heroic to embrace the truth in all of its forms. Some people, they look at life, and they just want to know, they want one specific philosophical take on it that they can cling to, and one truth. And then, so that they can have this sort of, exist in this kind of tunnel vision where they believe that they're in possession of the truth and they've got it all figured out, and that everything else is, either a distraction or it's an indication that a person is not on the right track, and so on and so forth. And like I've said, I mean, there are seasons for everything. And, I certainly don't think that I've got it all figured out. In fact, I know it. I tell people all the time, I don't have it all figured out. I'm going through this process along with you. And I've decided that as I take people along the way on my journey, which is also your journey, that I'm going to be honest and I'm going to tell the truth about how I'm feeling. And people can accept that or they can not accept it. They can criticize it. They can have whatever reaction they want. But at the end of the day, I know what I'm trying to do. I know where I'm coming from. I know where my heart is. And I know what my intentions are. And all of them are pure. And that doesn't mean that I'm pure. It doesn't mean that I'm not flawed. But certainly my intentions and my honesty and at least my attempt is about as pure as I can be, to tell people how I'm really feeling and to try to express the realities of the emotions that we're all feeling. And to be honest with folks, the strongest reactions, the strongest positive reactions that I've had to my podcast have all been rooted in people's emotional responses to the things that they've heard. Because they can resonate with the words that I'm speaking. Because they really reflect what's going on inside of their minds and inside of their hearts. And I can get on here and I can speak and I can express the things that they can't really do, and that exist within them, but they don't have a vehicle to be able to express on their own. And so when they listen to my show or other shows like it, they take great comfort in that. And so my intention is always to try to bring people comfort. It's try to either bring people comfort, to rally them, to shake people out of their apathy, for those people who are still apathetic, to get people to view things with more of a sense of urgency. But all of these intentions and all of these desires, they're all rooted in love for each and every one of you and love for humanity. And so when my rage comes across, and again, I try to limit it. I try to keep a lid on it. But when it does come across like that, and when I do slip in to these rants, I want people to understand. And it's not that I'm lecturing anyone in my audience. It's not that I don't have the utmost respect for every single one of you. And that's really the reason that I've decided to dedicate this podcast this morning to this topic, is because I have so much love and respect for my audience. That I don't want people to get the wrong idea about where I'm coming from, and to reinforce the message, the overall message. For people who have been listening to my program now for a while, I think they already understand, perhaps. But I think there are some folks out there that maybe needed to hear me say the things that I'm saying this morning, to remind them that, this is not, a momentary lapse, I guess you could say, into your anger and into your frustrations, and allowing that to boil up at certain points is not an indication that a person has abandoned their overall mission and principles and are no longer guided by the same ideals and the same motivations. But nothing has changed for me. If anything, I'm just simply getting more honest as time goes by. And again, there were a lot of people who really did appreciate it. There were a lot of people who loved yesterday's episode just as much as they've loved other ones. And like I said, I'm not here in the business of trying to please people per se. I mean, I do try to give the audience. I try to gauge what the audience enjoys. I try to give people, to the best of my ability, a taste of what it is they're tuning in for. the other side of that is that, I also don't censor myself in accordance with those same, feelings. I don't censor myself based upon how I think people are going to react to what I'm saying, because I also don't believe in that. I think every person has a right to say what they believe, to express how they really feel. And everybody who's listening has the right to either accept it or not, to listen or not, to change the channel or not. I firmly believe in that. So this is about making sure that people can recognize the truth in all of its different forms, and understand that just because we have emotions and feelings that sometimes run contrary to our highest ideals and our high, and our high vibrational frequencies. And I understand that, which is why, again, I try not to exist for too long in a mode of anger. But at the same time, I think it's completely naive, and I really think it's kind of disingenuous to pretend as if people don't have these feelings, and they don't have these emotions, and they don't have this rage. And that, I mean, hey, one of my listeners posted, I think, in the comments about, that first of all, he appreciated the anger and the rage and the honesty. Some people were turned off by it, but he appreciated it. And he also commented something along the lines of, that humanity, for generations, for thousands of years, we've been oppressed. And that collective emotion, that collective rage to our oppression, is surfacing in more and more and more of us as we get closer and closer and closer to seeing the tables turn, and to really embracing our new reality and to our ascension. So the closer that we get, I guess the idea is that the more of these suppressed feelings, emotions, and truths, and all of these things are bubbling up to the surface. Because, I mean, and let's also not forget, in this movie that we're witnessing, I mean, with every scene, it gets more and more crazy. It gets more and more insulting to our soul. It gets more and more frustrating, even though, even for people like myself who understand that what they're witnessing in large part is a pantomime. Nevertheless, it still drives me insane with anger. And maybe that means, who knows? Maybe that means that I'm just, I still have a lot of work to do on myself and in my own ascension process, and that may be the case, and that's okay. That's okay. I'd rather tell the truth about that than try to pretend that I'm something that I'm not. And with all the the positive feedback and the compliments that I've gotten from people, which I appreciate, and to say that I appreciated it is the understatement, probably the biggest understatement I've ever made. I mean, it's almost become a vital part of my daily food now. Is hearing from my audience and communicating with people who are like-minded, who are coming to my podcast and reaching out to me, and it's just the most amazing experience in the world. But with all of those compliments and with all of those warm wishes and kind words, I mean, it hasn't caused me to lose sight of the fact that I'm still in a growth process myself. And just because people say these wonderful things about me, and I appreciate every single one of them, and I thank God for you, all of you, for sharing that, and for being willing, for having such a generous spirit, and for being willing to share your love with me. Now, that hasn't, despite all of that, it hasn't inflated my ego. And that, I think, is the really important thing. I don't view myself as any more special than I did back in February of this year before I even started this podcast. I'm still the same person. And I'm flawed, and I'm growing, and I'm changing, and I'm doing the best that I can to try to evolve into the person that I believe that I was meant to be, in the same way that all of you are as we go through this awakening process. But it's not about, it's, a lot of people, I think, would allow some of this stuff to go to their head, would allow it to become, fuel for their ego. And I recognize the danger in that, because the minute that I make this about me and my ego and what, and how many views I have and all this stuff, I mean, I've completely fallen off. I've completely abandoned what got me started on this podcast to begin with. It was never about any of those things. It was never about how many views I could get. It was never about how big my channel could become, how many subscribers. It was never even about, searching for positive feedback from people. It was really just a vehicle for expression, to be able to express myself truthfully and to offer whatever analysis and commentary and perspective that I have to people. And they could either accept it or not, embrace it or not. And thank God, people have embraced it. A majority of the people who have listened to my show have had a positive experience that they've shared with me. But it's not about allowing that. If I allow that to go to my head and suddenly make it about me, well, then as far as I'm concerned, I might as well quit at that point, because it's not about me as an individual. It's never been about me as an individual. It's always been about we the people. And I just wanted to remind everybody of that. And I will say this. I mean, I'm not apologizing. I'm certainly not apologizing for my commentary yesterday. I'm not apologizing for my anger or my rage or any of that. But I will say this to those of for those of you in the audience who I do have love and respect for. If my rant and my rage yesterday was too much and you felt as if I took it too far, well, I guess I could say I think I'm sorry that you had that reaction, because that was never the intention. But at the same time, I'm not sorry for having said it, and I'm not sorry for having expressed what I said, and because that's what I was feeling. That's the truth about what I was feeling in that moment. And sometimes we have to remember that the truth about what we're feeling in any given moment isn't necessarily indicative of our overall outlook and perspective on everything. Sometimes, our anger and our negative emotions are very, very real, but they don't really fully encapsulate your view on a situation. And I think people who have been listening to me, they understand that. That yesterday was about expressing anger, and not only that, it was also just about it was about reminding folks, like what I mentioned earlier, that there's more of us than there are of them, and that we need to start recognizing that, and we need to start coming together in every single way. And when we see each other on the streets, and when we see injustices occurring wherever they may be, I think that we now have to take a page out of the book of those people in Australia and people in France and in other parts of the world who are setting the example for all of us. But this really is about freedom. This is humanity's last stand. If we don't rise to the occasion and freedom fails, then, well, do I even need to complete that sentence? I think everybody understands that that's just not an option. Failure is not an option. And the only way that we can fail is if we collectively, if we don't rise to the occasion as a species, as a whole, and we don't rescue one another and come to each other's aid when necessary. mean, the reason that this tyranny, again, one more time, I'll say it, the reason this tyranny is perpetuated is because of the compliance and the passivity and the docility of the public, which is changing, by the way. You know, they're pushing us and pushing us and pushing us and pushing us and pushing us. And finally, we're seeing people push back en masse. And that's, you know, whether we're talking about, you know, being spiritually pushed, emotionally pushed, or physically pushed. Regardless, my message is that we need to start pushing back, and we need to start coming together and standing up for one another and recognize that the reason that we have any freedom at all, the reason that we have any rights at all, is because of the ethos of collectively standing up for each other's rights. That is what gave birth to Western culture. And we need to embrace that once again. And we need to be willing to put ourselves in a position where, you know, we're willing to sacrifice, and we're willing to put ourselves in harm's way if necessary in order to stand up and do what's right and to fight injustice. I mean, you think about the civil rights movement in America. I mean, these people had skin in the game. These people were not afraid to put themselves in harm's way physically. And that's the reason, ultimately, that so many others were persuaded to come to their side, because they realized the depth of the commitment to justice. That people were not going to be deterred anymore. They were not going to be intimidated. They were not going to be frightened into submission. These people were some of the most courageous people in the world, in history. They are the most courageous, along with others who have done similar things all throughout history. These are the true heroes, folks. These are the people who put themselves second, and who put justice first, and decency and integrity and freedom. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves why we live, why we have the things that we do, why the progress that we've seen over so many decades. Of course, you know, we could talk about so many different examples, but all of these things happen, whether it's here in America or whether it's, you know, all throughout the world history. Positive changes for humanity have only come by way of the humanity rising up, transcending fear, and being willing to make a sacrifice because they believed in the principles that they were standing up, and they believed that those principles were more important even than their own safety and their own life. That's what heroism is, and that's what I'm talking about here, is that people need, and by the way, the people who busted through those line of tyrannical cops, those people are heroes in my view. They're everywhere, and heroism, I do believe, it resides inside of the heart, and it's something that it's a choice that we have to make as well. You know, I've been talking a lot about free will and the choices that we make. This is no different. All of us have the capacity to be heroes. We just have to rise to the occasion, and we have to make a decision. The principle is what matters the most. Freedom is what matters the most. Liberty. Not your paycheck, not your own individual safety, not your own cushy little job, not your own little world, your own little existence, which was only made possible because other people were willing to make sacrifices so that you could have that cushy little job, that nice existence. And I'm not suggesting that everybody out there has this, you know, has it so easy and we're just, you know, riding through life on a cloud by any stretch. But we do have some freedoms. We do have some rights that, yes, they're completely under attack at the moment and have been for a while, but they do exist, and they exist because of the sacrifices of those who came before us. And that's what I'm trying to remind people. And that same rage, that same anger, that same fighting spirit that I was expressing yesterday That's the same fighting spirit. Maybe it came out a little differently with different people, manifested differently, but it's the same spirit that has fought back against tyranny throughout the generations and that has enabled freedom to exist in any form. I believe that we should operate on a plane of love whenever possible, but I also am realistic enough to understand that, you need something other than love to fight wars. That's, we have these different emotions and these different feelings and different capacities for a reason, because there are times that we need to embrace them and we need to allow them to give us, prompt us in the direction of resistance. It's not just about one specific emotion. It's not just about one individual trying to maintain their positive frequency and trying to blot out anything negative all the time. I mean, that's great. But we also need to fight, folks. And fighting, at least in my experience, sure, the reasons that you fight are rooted in love ultimately. But the spirit and the emotions that prompt you to fight, that prompt you to act, are the ones that I was expressing yesterday. So hopefully people understand a little bit better. For those, I guess I'm preaching to the choir for a lot of people, people who enjoyed and already understood where I was coming from. But I felt like it was important to put a finer point on it today, and to remove myself now that I'm, not feeling the same anger that I was yesterday, and I'm a lot more calm than I was, to revisit yesterday's podcast and to put a finer point on it, to explain to people where I was coming from. So hopefully people appreciate that. Now, for those of you guys who are big fans of the show, you're going to be, I think, pleased, because I think today might be a double header. I'm going to obviously put this coffee chat out probably a little bit later, because I'm going to have to get going. I have some plans for today, but I'm going to put this coffee chat out a little bit later. And I think, hopefully, if I still have energy at the end of the day, I am going to be recording another podcast. I think I mentioned yesterday, largely focused on the work of Elena Danaan and Megan Rose. And I'm going to be exploring a conversation that they had recently. I took a whole bunch of notes on it, and I was just absolutely fascinated. So I think people are going to really, really enjoy that one. So stay tuned, and hopefully you guys have a wonderful Sunday. I hope you've been having a good weekend. And I really do appreciate everybody taking the time to listen. And I love each and every one of you. So God bless. I'll be back soon, hopefully tonight. Patriot out.